okay? Yeah, thumbs up. Aloha, farm neighbors and friends. I'm Colehour Bondera. I'm president of the board of directors of the Kona Coffee Farmers Association, or KCFA. And it's really with a lot of honor today that I kick off a serious effort where our group of farmer members is able to sit at our place at the table with other parts of the coffee industry and remember that we, the farmers, are the ones that deal with coffee leaf rust, or CLR. So we really need to be heard as much as or more than researchers or processors or others. But this message from me is to remind us all that for CLR efforts to be effective, we all must work together. And so we really need to try to identify what KCFA role is best for all. What do we need in terms of farmer decisions and actions? And my hope is that this introductory session will allow us to all move ahead together. Remember that with the coffee berry borer beetle, KCFA was able, through HCOA support, to help a lot of farmers. And I just want to note that 20% of over 200 participants in our program chose to use Mycotrol, recognizing the importance to the environment of organic pest and disease control options. As I am myself an organic Kona coffee farmer in Honau now for the past 20 years, one thing is certain, and I think most of us will acknowledge this: the coffee market demand is out there and prices are going up and not down through this pandemic, which we've been dealing with. And now with CLR and beyond, I see a lot of opportunity. I want to just go through, in this moment where we are now engaged in a virtual gathering because of the pandemic, to avoid direct contact, which I really thank all of you for joining us with. I want to go through a few logistics just to make sure that we're all on the same page. The first thing is that this session is being recorded and will be put on the internet so that you all are aware of that. The second thing is that participants have been muted so that we can listen to the presentations without interruption. So I just want to make sure you all understand that as well. We're going to be using the chat function in terms of communication. So at your bottom of your screen, it says chat. And that's where you're going to type your messages, and Chet Gardner, my co-host, will provide them to me, and I'll be asking the presenters in the order that questions were received. Let me just repeat that: in the order that questions were received. So if you have a question, type it into chat. Don't wait till later, because I'm not concerned, but I just want to yellow flag you that it could be that more questions are put forth than we have time until 5 o'clock to answer, in which case, I want you all to recognize that you can email those questions to info@konacoffeefarmers.org, and then I will forward them to the presenters for replies if there was not time, because we are going to stop at 5 o'clock. And so I recognize that questions could go on forever, but you know, we got to work within where we're at. I already mentioned that Chet is co-hosting with me, and we're going to be trying together to watch for all communications. And the final thing I want to mention is that the KCFA Education Committee Chair, he is at this meeting, John Kuntz. He will be the lead person in what we intend to be a series of these sessions. So I want you all to look forward to the next one, next Thursday, November 12th at 4 p.m. Watch for emails and website announcements. So that's what I wanted to go through. Let me introduce to you all our first speaker, Dr. Kevin Hoffman, the Plant Industry Administrator of HCOA. This division is composed of 3 branches: plant pest control, plant quarantine, and pesticides. The programs of the division are designed to prevent the entry and spread of harmful plant pests, to reduce the negative effects of established pests, and to regulate the sale and use of pesticides. With a PhD in entomology, he can readily understand the topics that we face. Thank you for your time, Dr. Hoffman.
Okay, there you go. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll start off real briefly, bring you up to speed. A little over 2 weeks ago, a grower in Maui turned in some leaf samples that had some necrosis on them. Those leaf samples were subsequently confirmed by USDA to have coffee leaf rust. In the meantime, we began surveying Maui Island as well as all the other islands. About a week after that, we found presumptive positives on the Big Island in the Hilo area. And then over the weekend, a grower in the Kona area came up with some leaf samples that are presumptive positive for coffee leaf rust as well. And so all those Big Island samples are going to USDA for official confirmation. This is required because coffee leaf rust is a federally regulated pest. So in order to get any kind of federal assistance, they need to be able to confirm first records for each county. As I mentioned, HDOA has been surveying all the islands. We have so far not found it on Oahu or Kauai. We've learned our part. We don't have any staff on Molokai and Lanai. We have communicated with our counterparts there who were looking for those islands as well. So right now we're trying to determine its distribution on the islands. We're also working toward trying to contain it on those islands where we now know it, where it's either confirmed or presumptively identified from, and that would be Maui and the Big Island. So we're working on some inter-island restrictions on the movement of materials which could spread coffee leaf rust to the uninfested islands. In the meantime, we're working with the Phytotoxicity branch and with University of Hawaii to look for control options that growers can use, and also that HDOA could use should we find ourselves in a situation where we believe we can eradicate these small populations of the disease. Because our position right now is kind of wait and see. We're trying to find out the extent of the problem, trying to contain it, and then look at next steps past that as far as responses. That's sort of my opening summary, I guess.
No, very good. Thank you. We haven't tried this next thing before, but we're going to go ahead and introduce the next speaker, and she's going to be doing a PowerPoint a little bit, so hopefully that goes smoothly too. We're going to hear from Andrea Kawabata. She's an extension agent with the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, CTAHR, the Kona office. Ms. Kawabata is going to help us better understand the outreach, which is already being worked on by CTAHR, and how farmers can expect to be able to be helped through the CLR topic. I turn it over to Andrea Kawabata.
All right, thanks, Colehour, and hope everybody's having a decent day and you guys are all staying safe. Let me share my screen and put up my presentation. Okay, one moment. All right, so my presentation is basically going to be on the use of various pesticides that we have available here in Hawaii for use on coffee. For coffee leaf rust, because we don't have any resistant varieties at this time, our option right now is to control, manage, and prevent the spread of this disease. And so in order to help you, I tried to get together this publication as soon as I could in order to help you guys decide what kind of products you could use and wanted to pick up and other information that goes along with that. So I really want to talk about managing the resistance to pesticides by coffee leaf rust, because we have very limited products and we don't want to lose these tools because we've misused the pesticides to control CLR. All right, so just to kind of give you an idea of what you may be looking for in the field first off. Some of these photos are from HDOA as well as other farmers that have found them on their fields. Basically, you're looking in the lower sections of the trees. That's where the rust fungus starts off as. Sometimes you might see some light yellowing of the leaves as spots on these lower branches. Sometimes it looks like Cercospora, one of the other diseases that we have. Sometimes it might look like a nutrient deficiency. Later on, as these spots develop, we might see some necrosis on the center areas of the spots. But when you flip those leaves over, that's when it becomes a little more evident between Cercospora and the coffee leaf rust. And in the early stages, you might see a lot of little spots like this. There might be some little more developed ones there. Taking a closer look at a leaf that's been a little more infected, these bright orange or yellow orange pustules can be seen on the back side of the leaves. This is a very heavily damaged leaf by coffee leaf rust. And you can see some of the color variations between the little different leaves that some of the farmers have found. In the early stages, sometimes we don't see the spores on the underside of the leaves, but you do see this kind of yellowing and infection by the disease. And then later on, as the disease progresses, you can see this orangey kind of powdery substance on the underside of the leaves where the spots are. And sometimes you'll see the darkening or the necrosis and browning of the center of those spots. So I have other photos of coffee leaf rust at the website provided below. And please check out the website as you can and during your time on the internet. So in the last couple of days, we provided industry with a publication titled Spraying to Suppress Coffee Leaf Rust. I wanted to thank Suzanne, Stuart Nakamoto, Lisa Keith, as well as HDOA for helping me to create this publication and to review it and getting it out in a timely fashion. So I'm just going to briefly go through this publication so you know what to expect with it. And I wanted to point out some of the important parts of it. And so on the first page, it just gives you a little brief update on CLR and what to look for and why it's important to catch it early to suppress coffee leaf rust and what it can do if you're really not out there looking for it for early symptoms in your field. And again, that's where we are hosting a lot of this information as well as this publication online. So the second page, it talks about how catching it early with less than a 5% infection rate throughout your field is really important in the use of these contact fungicides. And again, we only have contact fungicides. We don't currently have any systemic fungicides that are available for use on coffee. We're hoping to get something approved because with the combination of systemics and a contact fungicide, we'll have a lot more effective method of controlling and managing CLR. I really want to emphasize the use of products that are approved for coffee in Hawaii only and following the label. We know the label is the law. And also really important is to rotate the different products that I will talk about a little bit later that you have to use in your field. There are organic as well as conventional products. And rotation is very important so that we reduce the risk of pesticide resistance by rust and other diseases that we're trying to manage. Please make sure you guys are following the label for proper PPEs. Also, this was from Lisa, who's got contacts with CIRAD, and the research center did say that using a low pressure sprayer for that initial application is really important so that we're not spreading the spores even further with high pressure sprayers. And if you're not going out to pick up a new sprayer, you may want to look at the different nozzles that you're using to reduce that pressure and to get a little larger droplet perhaps so that you're not spreading those spores. Calibrating your sprayer is going to be really important. I'm getting a lot of questions from growers. You know, how much product do I put into a gallon? Well, I need to know how many gallons of water you're actually using to spray it an acre of coffee. And then I can work with you to then determine what product you're using, what rate you should be using, and how much per gallon you can use for that acre of coffee. So I still need some information from you, but it's really important because that way you stay within the label rates and you don't violate any of the product labels and HDOA regulations for pesticide use. So it's really important for good spray coverage. A lot of the spores are on the underside of the leaves and actively infecting the leaves from the stomata, which are found on the bottom of the leaves. So when you're spraying to control, manage, or even prevent the spores from germinating, it's important to contact the underside of the leaves. So you may need to walk a little slower in the field, really deliberately getting the spray solution on the underside of the leaves. You may need to look at a little bit of field sanitation in perhaps pruning off the lower laterals so that you can get the spray under the leaves, and also doing some weed control so you get good coverage as well as with pruning. Again, cannot emphasize rotating the pesticide use enough. And so this page talks about frack groups. And the frack groups can be found on page 6 of this document. So I'm going to highlight it here. And basically there are 3 different frack groups for the different fungicides that can be used on coffee to control coffee leaf rust. And so the different frack groups are colored. So blue is one frack group, yellow is another frack group, and then pink is the 3rd frack group. So in order to consider rotating your products, let's say you are an organic farmer. In your field first application, you could then switch over to badge X2 for your second application. You can always go back to Serenade. Now we need to still look at the labels for maximum use, but you have to switch over to another frack group in the next application. So you can either switch between 2 products, you can switch between 3 products, but please do not continue to use the same product over and over and over, or the same product that's in, let's say, the yellow section over and over and over. So really important to rotate. Some of the products can cause phytotoxicity if you're using higher rates that are allowed on the label. So please watch out for that, as well as if you're applying it and it washes off, it may not have been as effective. So you may consider something like a sticker spreader that helps it to adhere to the leaves and kind of weather any kind of rain. Other additions could be, you need to look at the compatibility of it. So you may need to look at, let's say, Bondera compatibility chart or compatibility on the labels for the different products to see if you are allowed to mix in fertilizers or different types of spreaders and stickers. The labels will also talk about that. Continuing on, for foliar fertilizers, again, please check the labels on the fertilizers as well as with the fungicide. I did get in contact with Bioworks recently, and I asked them about if all the products on this listing are compatible with Bondera. And it was, I have updated the listing, and I'll show it to you which ones are and which are not. But I wanted to point out that although they test the compatibility of different products with Botanigard, they also do not research the effects on product integrity as well as plant phytotoxicity. So you need to watch out for that in your fields if you're combining products. If you're trying to spray for anthracnose as well as Cercospora and coffee leaf rust, please be aware that anthracnose requires a higher rate of fungicide, and that rate is higher than what is required or what is suggested on the label for coffee leaf rust. So if you're trying to control anthracnose, you will need to look at the label for Colehour and use those higher rates. And if you are using those higher rates, you're likely to be also controlling and managing Cercospora and CLR. One thing we need to be aware of is that in using some of these copper-based products, if there's overuse, we could be causing copper toxicities in the soil as well as the plants. So please be sure to be doing your leaf samples and soil samples on an annual or biannual basis. Some of the other considerations are the re-entry interval period, and that can be found on the label of the different products that you choose. Also, some of the labels will talk about solution pH. So if you've got a pH that's too low, you may have phytotoxicity due to the sprays. And phytotoxicity, sometimes you'll see it as leaf burning. Sometimes the leaves fall off. There may be other spots on the leaves as well, so keep an eye out for that. There are also minimum and maximum rates per application that you should be following, as well as maximum applications for your earth season. So you don't want to be violating these rules and regulations. It is an environmental concern, as well as a violation of the product use, and you could be cited as the applicator. So please make sure you guys are following the rules on and reading and following the labels. Okay, so again, thank you to all who helped me create this publication. We have some resources of the different literature that we use to create this pub, and the links are clickable. You can go through that. And lastly, on page 6, we've got this table. So this is really important table that will give you an idea of what products you can use to control coffee leaf rust. And so part of this, again, is that Frack group, right? So we want to make sure that when we're rotating, we're using a different colored product. There is a label rate for coffee leaf rust here. We've got an estimated cost per application per acre based on some of the retail prices for these different products. So with the compatibility of Botanigard, some of these you'll say that it just says yes. Some of them have yes with a 2 next to it, and some of them will say unsure. The ones that have yes have been tested by BioWorks for compatibility. And like for Serenade, it says that you can combine them, but just do not combine Bavaria with Serenade when using 8 quarts per gallon, per 100 gallons of Serenade. So at these higher rates, it is not compatible. For the yeses with the 2s, per their email back to me, they are saying that these products are compatible with Bavaria at the label rates. And then for the unsure, according to their email, they are continuing to test these products, and as soon as they get results of compatibility, they will let me know, and then I can transfer that information to farmers. So again, there are organic products. You've got Serenade, you've got Coside 3000 O/X2, and the 2 double nickels. And then the other ones that do not have any label in the notes are non-organic. So there are different products there. The labels are clickable as well. So you can pull up the label that's been provided by HDOA on their website. And lastly, if you have any information, any questions, you can contact us. HDOA has a really great coffee leaf rust field guide and submission form. So if you're looking for CLR on your field and you see something that's suspect, you can submit photos as well as the form to HDOA's email there with the subject suspect coffee leaf rust. And if you have questions, you can also phone them. For APSC submissions, Brian Bush will be accepting disease submissions until December 18 because he will be retiring at the end of the year. If you are submitting any samples to the university, please let me know so I can give you the proper protocols for it, so we are not spreading it and letting it go elsewhere. Again, the website is there for you to take a look at. We've also got the sub-web link or sub-web page for the sanitation protocols provided by USDA. So if you're going farm to farm, what can you do to sanitize yourself as well as vehicles and tools? And then also we're working on a listing of CRL publications, and my contact is there for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Yeah, like you said, that was a lot of information, but very useful. Appreciate it. Last but not least, I want to introduce Suzanne Schreiner. She served as a past president of the KCFA. She now works with other groups, including executive director of SHAC and on the board of HCA. Ms. Schreiner can share her experience and perspectives of what else is happening around and how KCFA might best fit into this puzzle of best dealing with CLR. Thank you, Suzanne, for your efforts. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to give a brief update, and then we can get on to questions because I'm sure you have a lot of them. I'm going to talk specifically around HCA, and they have started a weekly interagency meeting between all of the groups that are working on CLR. And I serve as the KCFA rep on that, as well as Colehour is involved and Barbara Anderson. So 3 KCFA members are part of that. HCA themselves are planning 2 webinars coming up soon, and we'll circulate that information when it comes up. And the interagency meetings really are focused on 3 different silos. One is the governmental response, one is the scientific response, and one is the extension response. So I'm going to cut out a couple of those silos because you've heard from Andrea and Kevin, so I appreciate that they've covered that for me. So I would like to touch on APHIS briefly. That's the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service with USDA. They're on these calls. They have funding available for eradication and containment protocols. And they're looking at that now on how they can fund and prepare a CLR response plan for our communities that have it. They also have the ability to focus on some economic data to help us understand more how to treat this in an economical way. And kind of a sideline group next to that, but it has some APHIS members, is the IR4 group. And you heard Andrea mention we have 11 products currently available for coffee leaf rust. There are many more out there in the world from South America, but getting these products to the US can be complicated. And that IR4 group has taken up the banner for us and is specifically looking at getting more products here and registered in Hawaii. So this is good news. You heard Andrea talk about the Frack Groups. Hopefully we can get some more fungicides available so we don't risk creating some resistance in our coffee. PBARC wanted me to say, first and foremost, that the research they're looking at will not recreate the wheel here. There's an abundant amount of research out in the world on coffee leaf rust. And PBARC, our ARS USDA scientists, are going to focus on perfecting what we know globally for Hawaii and how it behaves in our environment. So the first thing that they're doing is they're trying to identify the specific strain of rust. And from there, a lot of research avenues will identify themselves. So there's probably 30 or more strains of coffee leaf rust in the world. The Purdue lab currently has samples from Maui and the Big Island. And hopefully within about a month, we'll know which specific strain. PBARC has also been in contact with a number of coffee and coffee leaf rust scientists in the US, as well as scientist friends we have in Colombia, Brazil, and Puerto Rico. And the 2 primary scientists right from the Hilo PBARC lab working on this right now are Lisa Keith and Tracy Matsumoto. And they're in the process of developing 2 grants for rapid response. And one is to test the efficacy of the fungicides that you saw on Andrea's list. And 2 is a monitoring and spray timing protocol, so we know better what to do in our fields. Lisa Keith currently has three samplers, three pieces of sampling equipment on Maui. She has 5, so she's going to look at putting 2 more samplers out here on the Big Island. And these samplers she used extensively for rapid ohio death. And she's actually going to go back and look at the historic research, the historic data from these samplers to see if we can know better when CLR showed up here. PBARC has weather stations all around the Big Island. One of the things they're going to do is they're going to pull that weather data out, plug it into a global rust climate model that indicates when we can expect rust to be good, when we can expect it to be worse. And this will shortcut a lot of the research that needs to be done here. So this is really good news. And there's really 2 aspects of rust that globally they look at. One is there is field control based on sanitation, based on proper spray timing. And the other is rust-resistant varietals for coffee. So there are no rust-resistant varietals that are easily disseminated currently here. There's a quarantine on bringing in plant materials. PBARC, interestingly enough, has about 36 varietals that are currently in a quarantine phase, because this has been a long-term plan of PBARC is to prepare for rust. Some 25 of those are rust resistant, and their plan before rust showed up was to do some research on what the cupping quality is of these samples. So they're going to try and fast track that research as much as they can. But in the short term right now, really, we're looking at agronomic responses, and that's spraying and taking care of your fields. And it's very important that our trees are healthy. So that means proper pruning, proper fertilization, and keeping the weeds down in our fields. All things we should be doing already. But healthy trees are much more resilient in the rust infection. So in addition to the PBARC work, I'll just briefly touch on SHAC. Many of you know we were heavily involved in CBB. We're talking with Puerto Rico about considering some joint grants like we ran for CBB. We're working with Luis Aristizabal, who's been on our staff for a number of years. He's looking at some of the agronomic response and taking a look at some of these Spanish research language documents, so we can contribute that to the conversation. And I'd like to leave plenty of time for questions, so I'll go ahead and cut it short there. The one thing I will add is I did get some input from someone who has many years of experience in the Dominican Republic, and his recommendation to Hawaii farmers who might be near an area that's impacted by rust was do a prophylactic spray as soon as you prune your trees, get some fertilizer in with that copper, get it out there, and maybe that'll prevent the spores from attaching in the short run. Obviously, it's here to stay. Most likely, we'll have to learn with this over the long run. But if you feel like you want to do something now, that would be something you could do when the harvest is over, or if you've identified it already on your farm. So, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Suzanne. So, like I said, we're going to try to go through the questions as they came, and I think honestly some of the questions, since I suggested that people start asking their questions early, maybe were already addressed to varying degrees. That said, I don't think that they're necessarily irrelevant either, because I think that there's still places they fit. So the first question was, would it help if we knew where CLR was so we could be extra careful there, which obviously can be interpreted in 2 different ways, because it could be extra careful going on that farm, but it also could relate to being extra careful in that area to not be moving it around to farms that are outside of that area. So anyway, any of you presenters who want to respond, go ahead.
So Suzanne and I added in there that the samples did come from Hilo as well as Colehour. We definitely need to be careful going from then those areas into your farm, but we also don't know which farms really have it. So really, you as farmers should still be careful going from your farm to another farm, because until you know for sure and have had your samples tested or your leaves tested when they have spots on it, you cannot tell for sure if you are also the ones with coffee leaf rust. So I really encourage you guys, please get out onto your farms, look for the symptoms on the lower leaves of the trees and submit some of these samples so that you can have them identify whether or not it is rust or not. And to keep looking, even if your samples come back negative. We just had a little bit of rain today, so that can help to get those spores to germinate as well. So you may start seeing more symptoms coming out in the next few weeks. So just keep an active eye out on your own farms, as well as keep talking to growers to spread the word, please.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. I just want to second what Andrea said. At this point, the survey is not be able to certainly not be able to completely survey the islands for this. We've actually been, ACOA has been biasing their surveys toward non-commercial areas like feral coffee, residential areas, because we didn't want to encounter a field that's infected, then move to another field and spread it that way. So we've been trying to not go directly into growers and just letting the grower, trying to get information out there so the growers can kind of scout their own fields, and if they have stuff, to let us know. So it is on Maui and is presumptively again on the Big Island. So just be really. And second, what Andrea said, just be on the lookout wherever you are and take appropriate precautions to not spread it even if you don't see it.
Okay. Yeah, this question process is a teeny bit complicated because I know that some of these other questions overlap with subsequent questions, but I'm not going to try to do it on another screen. It's a little too complicated. So the next question was, is badge ×2 as effective as Coside 3000? It's about 20% lower cost. And I know that Andrea responded to some of this kind of level of inquiry by saying you need to rotate if you're going to use fungicides. But the reason I say that is because another question is, that it's unclear how, I can't find it right off, but how often or frequently are these sprayings happening anyway? Like, because that relates to the cost issue and the rotation component. So I don't know if I've made it more complicated, but that's kind of a combination of two questions.
I think at this point in time, we don't know how effective it's going to be. We've never had rust before, so we don't have any field experience in Hawaii trying to control this disease. So in that sense, we're learning as we go. And I think Tracy folks are going to be really helping in that part to do some of the testing with the different products. When you look at some of the publications that are out there, again, we don't want to reinvent the wheel on rust and how to control it. But in dry situations, when we've had prolonged drought periods or dry weather, it is not conducive to sporulation. And so that can help to minimize the need to spray during those times. However, when we're coming up into the new season, we know that our spring gets a little rainy. We may want to spray during the late winter just to knock down any of those live spores during the ending part of that dry period, and then monitor for when the rains are coming and then start to spray. So some of the labels say no The minimum time period between sprays is 14 days. Some may say longer. And then some will also recommend 14 to 28 days for spray applications. So really you have to look at the label for each product that you're using to figure out how often you should be spraying. But you also should be looking at your plants. Remember, less than 5% for these contact fungicides. If you're allowing the spores and the spots to come out to a point where it's 10%, 20% of your foliage, you're losing that ability to control it. Once it gets into the leaves, these contact fungicides really are not as effective as systemics, and we do not have any systemic products. So we have to catch them early, keep a watch out for the weather, because wet weather helps those spores germinate and then infect the leaves. So I can't tell you exactly how many times you're gonna have to spray. It may be quite similar to what we're already doing to control anthracnose and to spray for CBB. You might be able to just combine the products with your Bavaria products and, you know, spray for CBB at the same interval. I'm not sure at this point in time, but I'm hoping we will learn a lot more as this goes, and we can learn from you guys. You know, keep in touch with us also with your observations and what's working for you guys or what's not working for you guys as well.
Okay, thank you. Somebody asks, and I think this was already addressed, but I don't know if I could really respond, so therefore I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway, again, if necessary. But the fungicides that you presented, Andrea, are they all currently available here in Kona, or just theoretically, or that's the question? Are these fungicides available here now?
Yeah, so I also included that in the chat. So some growers, as well as myself, we have been in touch with the companies to make sure that they are aware of coffee leaf rust here in Hawaii, and to let them know which products are available for use for the growers, and to have them in stock and have them available, and to be ready for the purchases, so that the growers have the option of using the different products. So it's out there. I don't know who has what and what the prices are for the different products, but please call around to check.
Okay. I don't think I heard the answer to this, but maybe I did as well and missed it. But the question is, which varietal was rust found in Holualoa? On which varietal?
Typica.
Okay. Thank you. I guess on the leaf of coffee, how can you tell the differences, like you were discussing when you were showing those leaves? You were mentioning similarities between other problems, or was it? God, I just lost it. Sorry. You said it's CLR, but yeah, Cercospora. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you. I found it just when you were saying that. But how can you tell the difference?
I think at this point in time, we should just submit leaves that look like they may have spots on it, just to confirm. From the naked eye, it can be really difficult to spot the differences between Cercospora and coffee leaf rust, especially in the younger stages. It's very hard to tell without the spores on the back of the leaves. So if you suspect anything, I would say submit it and get it tested.
Okay. Next question is, what precautions are necessary for crews and equipment? And I'm sure it varies by fungicide, so I don't know if that's a broad answer or if it can be answered besides look up the label. But if there's a response.
Anybody else want to answer? Suzanne?
Well, I'm also wondering if the question was about what precautions should crews and equipment be following. I think you mentioned it in your literature, Andrea.
Yeah, I just don't want to hog all this time here. There is a protocol that's been provided by USDA. It's what they use for a rod, Rapidohia death, and it is available online. So please check out the website and you can find it there. Over 70% alcohol can be used, and 10% Clorox solutions that are freshly made can be used to help sanitize and decontaminate tools and equipment. Just be careful because Clorox can be corrosive. For clothing, washing in detergent and hot water and drying in the dryer on high heat. That can help. You can do shoes as well. Anything you take into the field can be decontaminated that way if it's washable.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I got cut off back there, but I'm back on.
Sorry,
Let's
Colehour,
see.
can I just jump in here quickly?
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to add that for people who take their coffee cherry to a mill, if it's at all possible to get your coffee bags back rather than swapping coffee bags. This is something we saw with CBB, was a basic precaution early on, is try and keep your equipment on your farm as much as possible so we're not sharing diseases back and forth.
Thank you. I think that was kind of the next question, which is about transporting CLR on cherry, which the comment is, I guess it can be, but it sounds like from what you're saying, Suzanne, that it, to some degree at least, could be.
It's my understanding the spores can spread on just about anything, whether it's cherry, whether it's on your clothes, whether it's in your hair, just like any small pollen that can attach itself to you, it's going to grab on it. It wants to move around. So yes, to cherry.
Thank you. So I'm not sure about this last question we have right now that's in the chat box. It says, could spore come from heavy rain season that we've had? And I think we've talked a little bit about that, but I don't know if how any of you could respond to that question in terms of heavy rain moving the spore around, or how to address that.
Spores are highly airborne. They do need moisture to germinate on the leaves and then infect the leaves. So with rain, you know, we can see a lot more possibly coffee leaf rust infection on farms. Nobody knows where it came from exactly or how long it's been here, but rain is conducive to the spread of it on a farm and within a tree.
Okay. Sorry. I don't have any other questions right now. So any of you participants who want to bring up questions?
There is one keeps popping off. From Eric Allen, can you confirm if backpack air fluid sprayers are okay at lower RPM, or does this just spread it more? Maybe.
I think Andrea's still muted.
Suzanne, you want to take a hit at this one? You may have a little more experience with different sprayers than me.
Sure. Of course, there's a million different types of equipment that you can spray. And really what we're talking about is dialing back the air pressure You'll notice on some of the mist blowers, if your guys are in the field, you'll see the mist blowing 15 feet above your coffee tree, for example, when they're spraying Bovarea. You want them to dial that back as much as possible. Obviously, when you spray something, you hit a spore, it goes 15 feet in the air, it's going to drift down your coffee field. So the mist blowers do have the ability to dial back the air pressure. The truck sprayers also have that. If you're using a standard backpack sprayer, you're probably going to be okay. Just put a different nozzle tip on it that puts more gallons per minute through. Your backpack sprayer probably isn't going to have pressure enough to really be a problem here. But almost every piece of equipment, just read your guidebook and dial back the pressure to as low as you can. Shoot it in the air, see how high it goes, and try and get it as low as possible. I think this is one of these things we're going to work out over the long run, and eventually when the spores are everywhere anyway, it may not be the most important part of our IPM protocol.
Thank you. What does it say? Any prescription for spacing of coffee trees for future planting related to this question?
Well, I think it's clear from an economic standpoint that everything we look at in the future of coffee in Kona is going to be how easily can we manage this mechanically. So your tree spacing, you're going to be looking at being able to either pull a small tractor or a lawnmower with equipment on it, anything that reduces the actual labor, because we're starting to get very labor heavy with the addition of rust.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, what can we expect in terms of tree deaths? How long will they last with treatment?
Andrea, you want me to take a crack at this?
With proper treatments, I'm hoping we're not going to get any tree deaths, but where we will likely see tree deaths is going to be in the feral unmanaged sites and the poorly and unmanaged farms. Rust will likely take over those areas and then defoliate the trees. The trees will not be fertilized and they'll lose the energy to live. Might be a good thing to help us reduce the feral populations around. But then again, if it's somebody's farm, you know, it's their farm going downhill. So I'm hoping that farmers will be able to manage this, and I'll try and be here as much as possible to help you guys.
And just to jump on sorry.
Go ahead, Kevin. I'll let you
jump on. Okay, just to jump on what Andrea said about the feral coffee. We have in fact seen that on Maui. Some plants were basically defoliated by the disease. And you know, going forward in the short term, this disease is going to cause growers to kind of rethink how they do certain things. And one thing that's popular we've been talking about with H2OA is you know, some business models invite visitors onto farms in order to as a way for extra income and educate the visitors on how coffee is farmed and processed and so forth. So something that going forward, we see that as a potential for spreading the disease from farm to farm. So maybe something to think about how to do that more safely, I guess. Visitors on decontamination protocols, things like that. This would go also for management companies, where a certain management company goes from field to field to field. They'll start thinking more about decontamination as they move from one property to another. So it'll short term more managers, I think there'll be some adjustments that the growers may have to make as far as practices. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the 2012 rust outbreak in South America, which really brought rust to global attention because it did so much damage. And part of the reason it was so bad is the weather conditions were perfect for rust that year. And it also combined with a historic low price for green coffee, for commodity level coffee. So growers didn't have the funding to spray the fungicides in a proper manner. They weren't fertilizing because they weren't getting anything for their coffee, and it just decimated South America. We have to come into this with the viewpoint that our trees are worth a lot of money. We need to fertilize, we need to properly prune, and if we take care of them, if we keep them healthy, we may lose some trees, we may lose some unhealthy trees. As Bob Smith says every year in his pruning workshop, if it's a sick tree, pull it out. And that's going to be true here for rust. We're going to have some tree loss, but maybe those trees were not healthy to begin with. But let's focus on the agronomic, taking care of our trees right now. And I think that will help us in the long run with combating rust and tree death.
Okay, a few more questions it looks like, and I apologize that my connection break meant that I lost some questions, but I think we're back on. How far along is getting effective systemics here in Kona?
Well, there's once we've identified what we want, there's a couple ways we can do it. There's a special local needs process going through EPA to add whatever we need to basically make a special label with that allows us to use it on something on coffee that wasn't allowed for things like that. There's also a cross-functional working group that USDA has formed that's looking at this, and they have the contacts to be able to work with EPA to do some licensing, for example, adding coffee to a label fairly quickly. So a couple avenues that we have to work toward that. Hopefully sooner.
Thank you. I think this is a good question, but it opens up the whole shebang, because I remember this kind of topic when people were trying to use traps to identify CBB, and I'm like, yeah, that's helpful if you have a microscope, but not very helpful otherwise. And the question is, are other plants susceptible? And I don't know how one can address this, but if any of you can, in terms of susceptibility of CLR to other plants.
In the literature from South Africa, they have listed Gardenias as a potential host for burst disease. There are 3 native Gardenias in the Hawai'i Islands. 2 of them are endangered. They're not likely to be found, I think, near coffee fields, but something we're kind of keeping on the radar. We're not sure what role they might play as an alternate host. And of course, ornamental gardenias as well. It hasn't really been reported from elsewhere, just from South Africa, so I'm not really sure about the importance of it, I guess.
All right, thank you. We have a short amount of time, 1 minute. If any of the 3 presenters want to wrap up, we don't have any other questions. So if any of you had any final thing to say, this is the last opportunity.
So I'd just like to say thank you all very much for taking an hour out of your day to attend the meeting. And Hawaii Department of Agriculture looks forward to working with all our partners, including growers and other stakeholders and government agencies and University of Hawaii and so forth, trying to do what we can to minimize the effects of this disease on the coffee industry.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that for those of us who were around when CBB showed up, we felt helpless. We didn't even have an extension agent then. Andrea came on shortly after. And being in ground zero for this, it feels totally different. It feels like we have a lot of support from our government agencies, and I'd like to thank Andrea and Kevin for that. And we have a lot of research jumping in right away So I am more comfortable about this, even though it's probably worse than CBB, because I feel like we have the support around us. So I just wanted to share that we're not alone this time. We have a lot of help. So thank you guys.
Thank you as well. Please reach out to me if you guys have any questions or if you need help with any kind of calculations for the products that you do choose to spray with, and where to find me.
Okay, well, thank you to all the presenters and to everybody who participated. I think Kona Coffee Farmers Association appreciates it and appreciates moving forward. So thank you and have a good evening. Aloha, everyone.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.